Archaeoden update from Archaeodeath.
I'm going to start in a few minutes. I got my Viking mug with hot tea. I've got cold rum, just in case I need it. And I'm going to be discussing a whole host of Archaeodeath matters. Um, use the first 15-20 minutes just to talk at you while you pitch your questions at me. And then hopefully I'll move on to responding to various questions that come my way about death, burial, archaeology, contemporary politics, maybe. Who knows what will happen? Really good to be able to talk to you this evening. It's Sunday evening here in the UK, as you probably anticipate, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to be really tired. I had some up and down sleep patterns of late, but I'm really stoked for this because a bit, the unpredictability of TikTok. Today's been a busy day on the old app. I kicked out a few silly videos that I wanted to do just for a laugh, and then I did a response video that's gone, for me, big. Somewhere at 45,000 views at the moment, and it's still rolling with various outraged comments and good positive comments. So I'm just going to try and just talk at you, give you some updates of from the world of Archaeodeath, whatever that means, if I don't knock my own tea over. And then I'm going to sort of open up to any questions you might have. Anyone who's got any questions, hello, there's all sorts of familiar faces joining in. So what I wanted to say was, first of all, hello, welcome. This is Professor Howard Williams. I think that's my name. Yes, Howard Williams, that's me. And I am a professor of early medieval archaeology, mortuary archaeology, archaeologies of memory, the history of the subject and the history of archaeology. And I also dabble in public archaeology, the various ways in which the discipline interacts with communities, globally, digitally, but also locally. That's my kind of bag, and I try to use social media to discuss and share my knowledge in different fashions, including I've had since 2013 a WordPress blog, which you should check out, which is unsurprisingly called Archaeodeath, which I picked as a name because I thought it sounded funny and a bit metal and a bit almost self-deprecating in its edginess, because I'm not particularly edgy, if you haven't guessed, but also because I thought it captured what my interest, the archaeology and heritage of death and memory. So I've been doing that blog, and then I did a vlog from the COVID lockdown from April 2020. I started doing a YouTube for long format videos, which has served various purposes: site visits, debates, interviews, conversations, and so on. And also from the month later, May 2020, I started on TikTok. So I use TikTok to share sites, monuments, and landscape visits. To also, I use TikTok to have conversations, answer questions, engage in some of the debates that are going on, some of the raging debates in the world of archaeology, and to share my expertise. What I don't do is comment on every news story of an archaeological discovery, or I'm not your news service. I'm not here to go, I can read out for you a Wikipedia page or a new BBC News item. That's not really what I do, but I will comment on some new discoveries. And it's going okay. It's up and down, isn't it, this old app? You never know what's going to get attention. There's always silly, unpredictable things I do that get attention, and things that I really put a lot of effort into don't go anywhere. And that's the way of the app. I've had 3 really big videos go viral, or big, of late. One was totally unpredictable, as I was in Jerusalem and then the Negev region of South Israel for a workshop and study visit as part of my interests in the archaeology of frontiers, borderlands, and walls. And just on a little minibus, and I took a video of a solar power plant, and that's gone absolutely massive. I've got one of my biggest ever videos of just putting some of the Howard Shore Rings Return of the King soundtrack to a solar power plant, because it looks so awesome. And you can get, it's totally outside my expertise, so I'm just almost enjoying the ridiculous comments coming in on that video, because I've got no expertise in modern energy power plants. But one comment did bug me, though, was that you were toxic by using the hashtag archaeology for a video of a power plant. Well, firstly, the context I was there, solar energy, the archaeology of energy is a big topic. Past not pre-modern technologies, modern technologies of energy capture and creation. And also, of course, this is about landscape and frontiers, and this is one of those contested political military landscapes in the world. That's why I was there, to observe the different ways in which this landscape is being exploited, utilised, often at the expense of other people. So that was why that's what I do. I do contemporary archaeology, the archaeology of the 20th, 21st century, as part of my interest. So that's one of the videos that's gone viral. Then I did a call out video, my first ever call out video of a guy called Museum of Tarot who had blocked me 2 years ago, but someone else shared me his video, and I thought, this is just so egregious on multiple levels. It was almost like shooting fish in a barrel, or whatever, shooting whatever's in a bag, or whatever the analogy is. It's so easy to do a call out video, but of course I don't want to do that. I don't want to be stoking that kind of drama, but I did it, and that got a lot of attention. Some of it constructive, some of it just my poor choice of words getting in the way, but I did my bit. And then just now is this video on Viking face paint, and whether Viking face paint is historically attested, which it isn't really, but we do have one account from the early 10th century of eyeshadow or eye makeup or of some kind being worn by men and women in southern Denmark or northern Germany, in that sort of southern Scandinavian zone. So, but then I talked about the modern implications of that. So we can come back to answer any questions about that as and when. But before I do that, I just want to say hello, because I see comments coming in and I haven't read anything yet. I've just been babbling at you, but hello to everyone joining me. I'm going to, as usual, I managed to balls up and press the wrong bit of the screen on these lives, but just bear with me. I will come to your questions and I will do it in turn. I was just going to, before I do that though, I was going to actually just share you some other things that are going on in Archaeodeath world. Well, firstly is, partly because of those videos and partly because of some of the other videos I've done that haven't gone that massive, but I've been sort of steady and got a lot of interest. I've now had quite a big jump of followers, so I'm just hit 36,000 followers, which is, as with all of these 1,000 thresholds, is just incomparable. I can't even imagine what 36,000 people look like. If they were all sort of sat on my patio or in a lecture theatre. It's a big audience. I know that obviously any individual video will only be seen by a fraction of those people, but it's wonderful to get that at some point in the last 2 and a bit years. 36,000 people have found some motive to press follow on my account. So thank you so much for 36,000 followers, whatever that means. It doesn't hurt. It's lovely. It's wonderful to see that interest. I'm continuing to do my teaching at the University of Chester in the northwest of England on the Welsh border. It's kind of West Midlands, northwest England, Welsh border. It's a borderland between many British zones, is Chester. And we have a wonderful degree subjects that I teach. I teach on the History and Archaeology Combined Honours programme. I teach on the Archaeology Single Honours Undergraduate programme. I also teach on multiple master's degrees, including the MA Archaeology and Heritage Practice, the MA Archaeology of Death and Memory, surprise, surprise, and we also have an MRes Archaeology, and I also supervise advanced doctoral researchers, MPhil PhD researchers who are specialising in topics that are dedicated doctoral topics of research. So I'm involved in all of that. That's my day job, if there's such a day or night job. It all blurs into one as an archaeologist and an academic. And in that regard, January is a busy time. We've got the impending strike action that's happening across the UK, across many sectors, and higher education is being hit. My union has just declared 18 days of strike action through February and March, which is daunting, upsetting, stressful, and certainly not something I wanted to be involved with, but here we are. But the employers aren't negotiating with our union, and strike action seems to be the only course of action left to the union. So please support us in whatever way you can, because we're not trying to harm students. We want but their learning conditions, our working conditions are their learning conditions, and we're being screwed over, as are many British workers, and we're trying to push the case why we should at least not be gifted a real terms massive pay cut, which is what's happened over the last decade and is enhancing. We're perhaps not the priority of everyone's minds when nurses and other key workers are perhaps more prominent in the public imagination, sure, but I think we deserve fair pay. So that's what's going on, and working conditions. So that's what's going on in my sector. But I'm busy teaching, researching, I've got teaching my Vikings course. So I've just been been doing lectures on the archaeology of Viking Age Britain and Ireland, Francia. We even did a bit of Brittany, Frisia. We've also been doing the archaeology of the Faroe, the settling and Viking settlements in the Faroe Islands, and the recent evidence that there's sheep fecal matter has been found that pushes back the settlement of the Faroes by at least 300 years to around the 5th century. So it might have been those Irish monks in their currachs out getting to the Faroe Islands before the Vikings did. That's the latest thinking. And then Iceland. And next week we're on to Greenland and whatever you want to call it, North America, Vinland, as it is in the sagas. So we're going to be tackling that thorny subject with the latest evidence. And my students are out reading about Vikings in the North Atlantic, is the best way to describe it. I've got people very exercised about the description of Greenland and whether Greenland is actually North America or Europe. From an academic scholarly perspective, from someone interested in the Norse sagas, I call it North Atlantic, because Greenland isn't really, whatever you geologically and geographically call it, Greenland is kind of separate from Europe, and it's separate from the main parts people tend to think of America being. So I tend to call it North Atlantic, thinking about the Scandinavian presence in the Faroes, Iceland, Greenland, and then, temporarily in the New World. So that's the kind of thing I've been working on teaching. I'm going to try, and now, since you've listened to 11-12 minutes of me waffling on about just some updates. Oh yeah, I was going to show you some things. Hang on, I had something here to show you. Oh yeah, I've wafted this around before, but this is my latest journal publication. I was going to show you, this is Current Swedish Archaeology Journal, which is an academic journal edited by Sophie Bergerbrandt and Alison Klevness, and I contribute a response to a keynote by Soren Simbeck called Pirates in the Age of Populism, New Viking Exhibitions in Stockholm and Copenhagen. And I produce one of 6 commentary responses to Soren's paper called Public Viking Research in Museums and Beyond. So I'm pleased to see that out. You can download that online. You don't have to I just sort of waft a physical copy at you, because what that wafting allows me to do as an academic is sniff the book. And I'm a secret book sniffer. And fresh book is like catnip. Anyway, I'm just joking, obviously, but it's nice to have a physical copy of the new academic journal. That's volume 30 for 2022, Current Swedish Archaeology, and you can Google that and download the papers. But what Soren's talking about is how the Vikings are presented in museums, and he's really critical of these brand new multimedia, high-tech exhibitions in 2 national museums in Stockholm and Copenhagen, and I'm not disagreeing with him, I'm actually agreeing with him, but pushing it a bit further and saying, yeah, well, so what about national museums? What about other places? And the other thing that I've got a physical copy of, sniff the book, is, sorry, just give me a moment, is my own co-edited publication with Dr. Ben Guy and Liam Delaney, Office Night Journal 4, which is, again, an online journal, but there's physical copies you can purchase from Archaeopress. And this is a special issue on borders in early medieval Britain, looking at the historical, archaeological and place name evidence for frontier zones and borders in the early Middle Ages, from the big linear earthworks, but also a range of other types of evidence. And the front picture there is my photograph from the Pontosukta Aqueduct, one of the wonders of the Industrial Revolution, an aqueduct that goes over the River Dee on the Vale of Llangollen. And this is the River Dee you can see. The River Dee you can see, which of course is a very important artery of communication in and out of the upland areas of Wales, and also a border in itself in many ways further downstream. So anyway, so I just wanted to waft fresh book at you. The smell of fresh book. But anyway, let me answer some questions. So I have a question here. Hello, I have an archaeologist character in a script. Are there any misconceptions you dislike? What a fantastic question. And I'm going to answer this question by saying almost every popular portrayal of an archaeologist is rife with misconceptions. I suppose that it's not about whether I like them or not. They are powerful and in our popular culture. And archaeologists in pop culture, as I've discussed, in relation to TV shows like Doctor Who, horror stories, the horror genre, the mummy films, archaeologists are always elite, male, pompous, and they unleash ancient evils, and in many ways that's not wrong. I mean, in terms of, in some ways, that is a well-earned stereotype of the colonial tradition of exploring, plundering, and stealing other people's culture and putting them in a museum, and those mixture of key types that Professor Cornelius Koltorf wrote a book about 16, 17 years ago called Archaeology is a Brand. And he talked about the three main characterizations of fictional archaeologists that are popular. And his argument is that rather than dismiss these as wrong, we should embrace them. And one of the is the archaeologist as sort of adventurer, and an archaeologist as a detector archaeologist. So there's the adventuring, swashbuckling archaeologist. There's the detective type archaeologist. He's a person who detects and solves mysteries. And I can't remember the other one he has. I'm stalling now because I've suddenly forgotten. But I think he also talks about the archaeologist as curator, as sort of a person who tries to protect, a steward, a custodian of ancient knowledge. And rather than sort of say, oh, this is all wrong, it's nothing like most of my day job in a teaching role or in a museum role or in a commercial role. But actually, he says, if the public already have these stereotypes, we can work with them, we can adapt them, subvert them. And so in many ways, archaeology characters in scripts tend to fit these stereotypes of sort of detective, adventurer, or custodian, guardian, steward, and perhaps they are ways to play off things. But I think there's always ways to adapt that and play, make them slightly different than the standard white male with silly hat and whip, or with spectacles, who in seconds can decode ancient Aramaic. It's always ancient Aramaic, isn't it? There's no other language in the old disproportions between who gets there's still a white male European stereotype. I think there are so many black archaeologists, Asian archaeologists, female archaeologists, and intersectional varieties thereof. Gendered archaeologists. It would be nice if there was a different kind of mixture of archaeologists, in terms of personality, rather than the same kind of approach. I have a look of a bassist in a death metal band. Thank you. I finally processed and read that. Thank you. I think that's a compliment. I'm going to take it as a compliment. That's good. I've answered the question about archaeological characters. Please don't try and excuse people who have no idea. I will just answer the question about what I was doing in the Negev. So this was an invitation to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem to attend a 3-day workshop about frontiers, walls and borderlands, or walls, frontiers and borderlands, as part of an ERC funded project that is looking at particularly Chinese and Mongolian frontiers of the late prehistory, early historic period. So that's one of the things they're interested in, but they were looking at comparative perspectives. And the 2-day study tour, we were basically looking at archaeological sites linked to UNESCO World Heritage Sites too, and the ancient frontier role of that southern Negev region, of links to the Red Sea, Sinai, and the Arabian Peninsula, and Petra. We didn't go into Jordan to Petra, but we were into that zone in through from the first millennium BCE through the first millennium CE into the modern age. But we were also looking at contemporary borders, so we went to sites of modern contested space. We went to the Egypt-Israeli border, which was fenced in 2013 as a part of an Israeli policy to block migrants coming from Somalia and Eritrea. Very controversial, and a blueprint for their desire to fence everything. And so we went there and we looked at the infrastructure of modern borders, and we also looked at the utilisation of the frontier zone. So we visited some pretty cool archaeological sites. I'm still doing TikToks about them. I've got another 9 TikToks to share with you. One of which I'm not sure I can share, but I'm going to do it anyway, as long as you don't tell anyone. But I'm not going to tell you where it is, but I'm going to show you some pretty cool archaeology that is ongoing. Its excavation's ongoing, and it made me cry. It made me cry. I'm not emotional about the archaeological past. I don't go, oh look, burial, or anything. But no, this stuff was so well preserved. The archaeology was so well preserved. I was like, this I have to share at least a snippets of this with my friends because it's so awesome. So that's coming. So you're going to get another 8-9 videos from South Israel, one more from Jerusalem, which is also, there'll be lots of layers to my videos because obviously I'm trying to use my videos to both share where I've been but also perform a subtle critique on modern politics, and but not in a way that I hope is overbearing. You have to sort of read the video with multiple layers. My videos are like onions, layers, like an onion. Yeah. So yes, thank you for asking. Yeah, but it's a sensitive topic. It's a sensitive political area, and I've tried to navigate that in as careful a way as possible. Could you use your knowledge to determine what could happen in alternative history timelines? Björn, my friend, that is a fantastic freaking question. My God, that's a question and a half. So I think we can use, there's two things here. There's retrofuturisms. You know, archaeology can give us envision designs of past lands, past people's visions of not only their past, their present, but also their aspirations for the future. And a lot of the archaeology of religion, the archaeology of landscape and design is about plans for futures. And often we're looking at plans that never transpired. Many of the monuments and sites were never finished or completed or fulfilled their expectations. But that's not really what you're asking. Can we use our understanding of the past to predict or to conjure alternative history timelines? Now, this is an area that has been often given into creative fiction, you know, literary fiction has explored what if Hitler hadn't been shot or shot himself, or what if there hadn't been a Black Death, what if Christopher Columbus had sunk in the middle of the Atlantic, you know, all these kind of hypotheticals. And some of those kind of hypotheticals and alternate timelines are just childish and infantile and rest on a very simplistic connection of causation. And Doctor Who and other things like that, fictional shows, do indulge that kind of cheap, easy, oh, what if we altered the timeline, everything would be different. And really, I don't think so. A lot of human processes that we're looking on an archaeological scale, some minor tweaks aren't going to make that much difference. There's butterfly effects and, you know, all that type of thing, but honestly, the one small tiny shift in a broader process isn't going to make too much difference. But I think archaeologists could, both in a creative way, learn off historical fiction and learn off fictional worlds to help with their education, because it's a way of getting people thinking, isn't it? It's an educational tool, a public engagement tool to get kids interested. You imagine if, but you can envisage those worlds where different scenarios are encountered. So I do think there's a lot of public education, public engagement potential. In terms of predicting alternative timelines, I think archaeologists are well placed to discuss this, but I'm not sure any of us really are trained properly in doing that. And I think there's a lot more that could be done there. But I'm going to think further about that. I certainly think so what I'm trying to say is, yes, I see the power of that fictional alternative narratives. And as a way of also critiquing how ludicrous some of pseudo-archaeological narratives are that are so far removed from anything that's plausible. You know, providing an alternative that is plausible is actually quite easy. And you can imagine, like, what if, say, a colonial scenario was reversed and actually, so the Aztec Empire by the 18th century started colonizing Ireland or something like that, you know, in some alternate universe. And that would be really fun things to play with. Of course, there's a lot of ethical and potentially quite traumatic baggage with that, because by doing that alternative, you do shed light on the real traumas of real history, and we wouldn't want to be seen to be detracting from that or playing with that. So I think there's an ethical responsibility there, but I think there's a lot of public engagement and critical thinking, and I need to think more about whether that there's more potential there. But thank you, Björn. That's a really interesting question that's got me thinking. I hope it's got some of the other viewers thinking as well. I'm going to move on from that one and see if I've got any more questions. Yes, there is. How would one go about getting into archaeology, moving towards towards studying archaeology, says Wally. Well, thank you, Wally. I've done videos on this, but there's other student creators on TikTok who have done better videos, including Archaeoden and Steph Archaeothot. And but I would say the simple way archaeology is a discipline. There's many. It's actually, if you're going to do a humanities degree, you've got more career options from an archaeology degree than any other humanities subject. It's really versatile. But if you're getting into archaeology, it's usually via an undergraduate degree. And an archaeology degree, it doesn't get taught at schools, or it does under other names. You get to dabble in bits of archaeology, but you don't really get to do archaeology at schools in the UK, that is. So really it's a higher education degree, primarily, and from that you can jump into a range of career roles, including working in museums, in government, commercial archaeology, and in academia itself. It's very competitive, there's not that many jobs, and they're not as well paid as they should be. Of course, when I become world dictator, everyone will be forced to take compulsory 3-year degrees in archaeology, and anyone doing videos about jumping into tombs to commune with Nazi ghosts will be sent to some kind of distant prison camp. Because I have to be cruel to be kind. It's part of my role as archaeology world dictator. But until that time, yes, archaeology still is a relatively small subject. Archaeology has lots of misinformation. People are really keen to dump on archaeologists because they see as some kind of there's so many stereotypes that are not helpful for us about what archaeology is. But you can get into it through an archaeology degree, and it does lead to a range of potential career roles. So I would still say an archaeology degree is the first way into a career in archaeology, or getting into archaeology. If that's not open to you, there's many ways of learning, through books, through YouTube, through websites. I mean, that's one of the reasons I do my blog and do these videos, is to I'm not snobby about it. You don't need a degree to learn. There's many ways you can access information, and about learning how to critically sift through that information is what I'm here to help people to do. That's why I don't do call outs and very sort of harsh dismissals of people. I do shout out when people say nonsense to me, and I don't mean to be impolite, but if that offends people, tough. But equally, most of my content is here to try and put people on the right path. I hope that gives you some idea. But there's loads of local archaeology societies, there's loads of local archaeology sites. Just visiting sites can be a wonderful way to get into archaeology, visiting your local castles, historic villages, towns, prehistoric sites, depending on where in the world you are. One thing that keeps getting said to me, which is a real index of a colonial attitude, is when people say to me, "Wow, it's wonderful you Brits have so much archaeology, because we don't have archaeology in insert part of the United States or Canada." I tell you, yeah, you do have lots, and I depending on my mood, I say, "Oh yeah, that's true," just because I can't be bothered to pick an argument. Or sometimes I just go, "No, that's because that's a freaking colonial attitude, because you don't affine to the important, historic environment, which is mainly, indigenous, and you may not be indigenous, but you can certainly show interested and care for those traditions and those ancient sites, and that you don't need to come back to Europe." There's a very settler colonial attitude. Oh, you've got to go back to Europe to get in touch with history. There's plenty of archaeology. Archaeology is global, apart from Antarctica, but even there's an archaeology there, because human exploration in the early 20th century has left its mark on Antarctica. So there's archaeology in Antarctica now, left by European explorers. But apart from Antarctica, which is special, and unless you're a H.P. Lovecraft fan and think there's all sorts of ancient gibbering creatures with Cyclopean architecture down there, which there isn't, but who knows. Oh God, I'm going on a tangent. Anyway, what was I saying? All the other continents have rich, deep archaeological stories to tell. So I would say there's lots of ways of getting into archaeology, getting into your local sites, getting into your local resources, getting into local societies, historical societies, archaeology societies. But in terms of profession, it tends to be a degree level entry. Thank you, Wally. That's really cool. Shiguni14. I am new to TikTok, and I'm just happy that archaeology has a platform here. It does. And students are such a key part of that. There's professional archaeologists such as Archaeowolf. There's Natty Nat, another great geoarchaeologist. There's various sort of archaeology creators who've got degrees in archaeology but are sort of between jobs and various other positions, or doing it as an amateur, in an amateur way. There's academics, but there's not many of us. So I just hope we get more of us. It's not an exclusive thing, you know. I'm happy to have somebody new, healthier, and more wholesome looking and more engaging to get on this platform and in 5 videos overtake me and get 100, 200,000. It doesn't hurt me. It's only good. And you know, there's a lot of people spouting archaeological stories who don't know what they're talking about, and that's fine as long as they are just honest about what they know and what they don't know. And if they're just reading out a BuzzFeed article and going, guys, you'll never believe what's been found in ancient Egypt, guys. And if that's the level people want, that's good. I'm not going to do that. I don't give a flying fart much about ancient Egypt. It's fascinating, but it's not my field. But secondly, I don't want to read out the news to you, you know. But there's plenty of ways you can, as long as you just be aware that not everyone talking to you on TikTok is an expert, and even if they say they are, you know, that's fine. It's a broad church. In fact, it's not even a church, but you know what I mean. So it's only good. The topic, Arctic Pharmacist, is here. Sorry, I didn't even realise. Hello. Yeah, the topic is questions for me. Now I've reached 36,000 followers. That's all it is. It's just having a chinwag, which is basically me babbling. Answering questions. Is the account source for Viking face paint the same one as the ship burning funeral account? Not exactly, mate. Con. There's 2 things you're thinking about here, and I can quickly go through this. So it's Ibrahim al-Tartusa, I think, is the name of the El-Andalus scholar, traveller merchant of a Jewish extraction, who is in Schleswig, as it's described as Schleswig in the translation. It's probably had to be in the early 10th century, and is witnessing eye paint. Then you have the account of Ahmad ibn Fadlan, who's a near contemporary, a little older source, I think by about 10-15 years, who is an emissary, an ambassador from the Caliphate, and he is visiting the capital of the Bulgars, and he encounters Rus, who could be seen as Eastern Vikings, but there's a whole nuance we have to present there, because the Rus are a confederacy of Chuds, Slavs, Norse, and others, and some of their warriors are described as being covered in paint, or paint or designs, which could be tattoos, not all face paint. I think it's more likely they're tats, but we can't be sure because we've got no evidence from Scandinavia itself of tattooing, which maybe just we haven't seen the evidence, because it's really, you're not going to have preserved bodies, bog bodies from there. So, you know, it's an absence of evidence. We can't answer the evidence. So there's 2 sources. So the face paint is eyeliner, or some kind of eye makeup that is mentioned by a merchant from modern Spain, from one end of the Islamic world, and from the other end of the Islamic world, from originally from Baghdad. He's travelling up, reaches the Bulgar capital on the river, the Volga, and there he meets a travelling chieftain of Rus and describes them and so on. So yeah, it's not exactly concrete proof of what's going on in Scandinavia. I mean, my attitude towards it is I don't give a flying fart what people do with their faces, their hair today. I actually don't care. I'm not a Norse pagan. I'm an academic. I don't give a flying fart what people, and I think fun, playful, experimental, imaginative uses of face paint, of hairstyles are not my problem. And it's more of a problem for Norse pagans, who are sick and tired, I think, of people trying to say, oh, it's authentic, we've got a source, and I think that's where it bothers people who have a faith or cultural interest. But I don't care. What I'm interested in is making sure people are aware that these are really our modern day traditions, and that these face paint, tattoos, don't pretend you're continuing an unbroken tradition of over 1,000 years, you know. And I'd say the same to any other faith group. If some Christian rocked up to me in a local church and said to me, you know, I'm following a Christianity that is stayed exactly the same as was worshipped by Jesus himself, you go, what? You know, some kind of contradictory nonsense from, you know. So I just go, No, mate, that's bollocks. You know, oh, I may just do a Louis through and go, that's interesting, yeah. But my point is, it's the same issues. I don't care on a faith basis or a cultural basis, but I also see the damage this can do and the misinformation it spins. So I'm trying to say, look back to the source material, and then also think about the repercussions and implications of your choices. And if it's obvious you're just a guy doing an exercise video and doing a funny Ragnar Lothbrok voice like the wonderful Tank Tolman, I've got no beef. I think it's great, it's fun, it doesn't do any harm to anyone. But if you are sort of putting on face paint that's perpetuating a negative stereotype that also impinges on Indigenous people, then I think there's a conversation to be had. I'm not telling you what to do, but you need to be aware of that. You know, for me, I haven't put on cosmetics myself, right, in any serious fashion, but I would imagine it takes a shed ton of time to do that. And given that people are online constantly anyway, it would take them literally a minute of looking on Wikipedia to at least think about some of these things, to look at the look at hate symbols online and see, well, what are the symbols that are really been used by people in the 20th, 21st century to spread various vile ideologies. Maybe I should not daub that on my face. It's not complicated. It's just like sort of common duty of care, customary, basic, remedial research, isn't it? And I think that's what we're talking about here. I'm not trying to police what people do. It's about just trying to raise awareness. That's my take on it all, really. Oh yeah, thank you for the congratulations. Thank you. You're 36,000. It's really daunting. With great power comes great responsibility. I'm like Spider-Man, an Archaeo Spider-Man, really. I've got to look out for green goblins in the form of pseudo-archaeologists. But, apart from that. My professor finds it funny that people use Vikings as an example for hairstyle discussions. That's a really interesting point. I mean, so the hairstyle discussions are really interesting. So there's a lot of heated debate about dreads and stuff like this. And again, I've tried to steer away from talking about how the people should wear their hair, but to talk about the fact that some people are using tiny little 1-2 centimeter length Vendel period, actually not even Viking, it's sort of Vendel period gold foil figurines. You're going, oh, this is evidence that they had dreadlocks, and you go, no, it's not. It's 3 lines of hair incised, on a small stylized representation of a human figure. You could say they had anything on their hair based on that. It's nonsense. People are so reaching to justify their entitlement. That's what I think is going on. So I think it is rather funny. Death and memory sounds cool, says Wally. What does a course entail? Okay, I can get back and talk about the courses. So an undergraduate degree in archaeology, we assume no knowledge. We assume people haven't done archaeology before. We're looking at good, keen students, and a standard undergraduate degree in archaeology will give you a core training through 3 years to do archaeological theory, methods, and techniques. And then you will also have special options where you may study the archaeology of ancient Cyprus or the archaeology of the Mesolithic, or specialist subjects like that. So every undergraduate degree is different, but you have a core training, and we benchmark that across the UK. So your degree is of good equivalent quality at Chester as it is to, say, York or Durham or UCL or Winchester or Bournemouth or wherever. But then when you have master's degrees, you're going into advanced level training, and you can get an MA archaeology and specialise in something really cool. But we offer something that's a bit more interdisciplinary. An archaeology of death and memory MA, and the archaeology of death and memory MA at Chester is unique. We don't have any others like it. And what it does is we explore how past people disposed of their dead, commemorated their dead, and constructed their senses of history through their landscapes, through monuments and writing and other forms of preservational memorial practice. So we look at archaeology and the relationship between mortality and commemoration and memory cultures, and it's really cool. And I teach on it with my colleague Dr. Amy Gray-Jones, who is a bioarchaeologist, so she specialises in human osteology, actual human bones. She does really cool research on Mesolithic archaeology, sort of final post Ice Age hunter-fisher-gatherer societies in Northern and Western Europe. And so we play off a lot of themes between us, and I teach on it too, and I teach all sorts of fun things on that. So yeah, so that's just to explain to you what it's all about. It's a really cool course. You're trying to defend your dissertation in the spring. Well, good luck to you, 10. Oh, 10. Oh, hello. Yes, archaeologist. Yes, hello. For anyone reading the captions, he's talking about the Faroe Islands. Oh yeah, oh yes. Well, a whole. I could do lots of. I've actually thought a lot actually about creating a whole series of playlist of pseudo archaeology where I make up nonsense theories about like the Egyptians recreating the Faroe Islands and just letting people laugh. But the problem is, all it takes is one person to believe me, and before you know it, a whole new genre of pseudo archaeology is spawned, and I'll do that sort of Hollywood line of looking back at TikTok and go, "What have I done?" as the locusts cover me, as in the Mummy film, clutching the Book of Ra or what the heck it is, and he's going, "What have I done?" And that'll be me, So, but I had just think of doing a pseudo archaeology video about the Egyptians in the Faroe Islands because it's called Pharaoh, but then, as I said, someone will believe me, won't they? So what can you do? What do you think about calling the... Yeah, okay, this is a really good question. What do you think about the calling of 800 to 1000 the Viking Age? Wow, that's a fantastic question. So I will tell you my answer to that. The Viking Age is one of a series of really... problematic, to use that phrase, the American phrase. It's a problematic term because it's rooted in 19th century romantic nationalism, racial theories, and white supremacy, right? As is everything, right? But particularly the idea of a Viking Age, a time which birthed the nations of Scandinavia, from which a particular distinctive phenomenon that crafted nations and cultures. And I still have Scandinavians in my comments every day saying, "This is my history, my culture." And what they're talking about is a nationalistic pride, as well as some genuine frustrations with creators from elsewhere talking nonsense about Scandinavian history. Now, this term Viking Age is in the literature, it's everywhere. The Viking world, Vikings. It's a great way in. I could give 100 videos. I could do 100 videos about the 7th, 8th century church in the Kingdom of Mercia, and I would get less views than one video about Viking hairstyles. And I'm afraid we have to accept that people love Vikings. The Vikings are everywhere in our pop culture, from Marvel to museums to popular TV shows. That Vikings is our catchword, our way in, and it's a blessing and a curse. And we all know that as academics. It's a freaking nightmare because it brings lunacy, pseudo-archaeology, white supremacists in, but it's also a really constructive way into the media. And every now and again, it's not a new thing that our academics have for like 50 years said we're trying to critically and cautiously use the term. We repackage it or we reframe it. So you'll find a lot of the literature doesn't use Viking beyond the cover of the book. So I'm just trying to see if I've got any books on the Vikings here. No, I've put them all away. But the Viking Way of Neil Price, or Children of Ash and Helm, subtitle A New History of the Vikings, or whatever it's called. Vikings are the way in. People love the Vikings, and if I think as an archaeologist, if we perform the retirement of such terms, as some of my North American colleagues like to do, we are just doing very little to serve our discipline, and we're performing a kind of pearl-clutching, precious, look at me, performing my reluctance to use these terms. And we're actually giving cultural, social, historical space over to extremists to use. So I think these terms are out there. They're not ours to control. They're not ours to retire. And actually they have a lot of positive use, but we have to balance it up with an awareness of how misused they are and how ultimately problematic they are. And we do that, we don't just say that, we do that very carefully and critically by the way we research, the way we frame our questions, the way we're constantly bringing back people to the idea, when we're talking about the Viking Age, we mean this. And so I find it a little unhelpful when people say, oh, Vikings are just a job, there's no cultural, historical context to it. It's not just that. But equally, Vikings is a loaded term. So I would say we're not going to see the end of calling the period from 800 to 1100. It depends where you talk about Vikings. but we are going to see a continued fight for Vikings, challenging the misconceptions, and there'll be shifting misconceptions, particularly by extremists who will shift their focus from one thing to another. This year it will be face paint. Next year they'll be on to some other nonsense, and we've got to keep on top of it, challenging these preconceived ideas and moving forward the narrative. That's my response. So I still use the term Viking because I think the term Norse has other baggage with it, and I think abandoning the term entirely leaves people completely disinterested and unable to gather what I'm talking about. Which university do I teach at? If you're all right with sharing this, I did mention it earlier. Yes, Eddie, thank you. It's the University of Chester. It's an English university in the UK, on the Welsh border, and that's where I do my day job. And thank you. Is it a good read for noobs? I don't know what. My books. I'm going back hours now because I'm catching up. No, not. I mean, which one? Noobs. I don't know which one you're talking about. But don't dipping into anything. I mean, the thing is, academic literature. Many of us write really badly. Others are actually really quite good, and even our more technical stuff is actually still sections where you can dip into it and get something out of it. So I would, to get into reading academic material, whether it's scientific reports in paleoenvironmental studies or ancient technologies, just give it a go. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of the academic literature. Don't live in fear, because you may not understand every word. My students don't understand every bloody word, but I don't understand every word. I often go, there's a sort of Peanuts cartoon where Lucy's asking Linus about what do you do when you get to a complicated Russian word in Dostoevsky or something. I just blip over that. That's what I do. That's what we all do, because there's so many subspecialisms. But get into reading the stuff if you're interested in it. We're still on the new book, smelling the best bit. God, I haven't got getting behind in my questions. Oh, really? The National Museum of Copenhagen has been getting a lot of criticism. I better speed up if I'm going to get to the questions. I do get to talk about my interests. I do love that. I keep freezing. I'm sorry about that. I'm not buffering. I've never buffered in my life. How dare you call me a buffer? I keep freezing, Professor. Well, I'm a bit cold. I've also got dad humour, prof humour. I wonder if I like the cure. It's just because I've got these gloves on, isn't it? It's Twisted Sister, the other comment I got. You seem like a really cool teacher. I mean that as a compliment. Oh, thank you. I try. What's my thoughts on repatriation? Can I answer this very quickly? Return everything. No, don't. I mean, I think repatriation, in the academic community, I think repatriation is, most academics have long argued for repatriation of cultural artifacts. I get very frustrated when I see people talk about this on social media, because people often act like academics have never thought of this idea and are not involved in this idea. I know I've talked to scholars who are now dead, who were, quite old when they were alive, who have worked their entire careers in US museums or academic contexts, fighting for repatriation, working with indigenous communities. This is nothing new. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying we're down the generations of this process. And it doesn't really affect me too much. I deal with it in terms of mortuary archaeology, and it's really important. But also, I have to say, again and again, I come up against this North America is the entire universe, and any localized responses outside of that in relation to New Zealand, Australia, Austria, Zimbabwe, it doesn't matter. It's an American framework of understanding repatriation, which is not very helpful. So yeah, I think it's really important. It's nothing new. It's a process we're ongoing. We're part of the problem and part of the solution, and archaeologists are really trying hard. But we don't. A one-size-fits-all process, is an insult to the many different colonial and imperial legacies that affect globally. So we have to adapt it to local conditions. God, I get so many comments here. This is fantastic. The problem with academic archaeology is that you often end up paying for practical experience. Okay. I'm not sure what that is about. I was being an archaeology student. Well, I think archaeology is both an academic discipline and a practical subject too, and we try to show the many ways in which those things connect together. So I think it is important to have training in practical experience. In Denmark, we are lucky to have an exam in the practical experience. Oh, that's good. I mean, my students get lots of practical experience. We have a whole month training school, for example. Oh, thank you, Sue Skyfox. Lovely to be in touch with you. Thank you. Well, it's not nearly enough, but we're not a job. But you can't have it both ways. You're going to have to learn on the job, and commercial companies are going to have to train you in the particular equipment and particular tasks they do. What we're trying to do is give you an academic subject degree that gives you the basic practical skills that you can then take forward. So I think if you're a good student and you work hard, and you'll get employment and adapt your existing skill set to that role. But you have to remember also, Eddie, that many of the practical skills that you'll be most using that you get from your degree are not how to use a trowel or how to set up a total station. They'll be how to write a rapid, succinct report and to argue a convincing case, or talk to a client, or talk to a member of the public. There's some of the skills that we are giving you that you can avail yourself of. And the other thing I do within my degree is we give a lot of our students really useful contacts with commercial sector, employers, museums. So we try a lot of that and try to make sure that we give students the contacts as well as the experience and practical engagement. But if you're talking about the cost of training, separate training programs, I do concede that there are some really expensive training programs out there that you think, best to try and get it in-house if you can, or voluntary, without you having to pay for it. I certainly didn't pay for any degrees I did, any excavations I did. They either paid me or I did it for free when I was training up as a student. I wouldn't pay, 5 figures to rock up on an archaeological site, or 4 figures, sorry, not 5 figures, or 3 figures even, or any figures. I wonder if and when someone will dig up a polar station. That's a good question, Arctic Harmacist. I think the answer is probably very soon. There's a wonderful project done by Norwegian archaeologists at Tromsø, I think, which must be up near you, on the archaeology of Svalbard, of the Pyramiden mine, and they're doing a photographic archaeological survey of the ex-Soviet mining facility with statues of Lenin and abandoned libraries and evidence of it's a fantastic book about Pyramiden. You should check that out, or I will send you the link. But I'm sure it's archaeologists at Tromsø did that, and it's really rocking project. Or is it Trondheim? One of those northern Norway. You should admire archaeologists, Rebel Rabbi. Of course you should. We have to get the Simbeck on TikTok. You have to get Soren. He is the poster boy of archaeology, of Viking archaeology. Either that, or he looks like a rejected member of Aha. I'm not sure which, or probably both. But you should definitely get him on TikTok. He'd be brilliant. He's got a little YouTube channel that he never kept up, and he was brilliant at it. Again, my comments are spinning out of control, so I think I'm going to jump back. Why does it do this? Get the Spinbeck on TikTok. Need an ice mummy to settle paint and tattoos. Yeah, absolutely. We need an ice mummy. Always get the ice mummies. We could dig anyone up from the glacier. I can volunteer for that if you want, but I don't have any tats, so I won't be any use. I thought I should thank Trump for normalising makeup for men when it was actually the Vikings. Trump enters the conversation with a class comment. Thank you. Of course, it's about, critical thinking is not common these days. I dig that Spider-Man... Scranton, PA! I didn't think Scranton was a real place, but it is. Spider-Man as an archaeologist. So I'm way behind. I'm getting through. Hi, Anna Chitwood. Hello, Solitary Pagan. Lots of chat here. That is probably about 10 hours ago. We have the ancient aliens guys. Did you like the Northman? Can I answer this from Apostrophe? And thank you for your comment earlier about what tattoo. I'm still thinking of an answer to that, which tattoo I should get or would get, which is a Norse symbol. But I'm going to answer this one about the Northman. I hated the Northman, and yet it is one of the most accurate and inspired by modern scholarship renditions of Viking society, and I despised it, not because of its lack of accuracy, but because it's such a tossy. monotone, miserable plot of Ruwengi. I was just blooming, and everyone was bad in it. Even the wonderful Nicole Kidman was sucked, in my view. I hated the Northman, but I loved some of the costume. I loved some of the architecture, but it was like watching paint dry for me. I came out of the cinema so angry. That was one of my other viral videos from late last year when I got Americans confused because they didn't know what F all meant. But anyway, let's not go there again. Bless my American followers. I love you all, apart from those that try and shove your shoulders into medieval tombs. I know that Snowkiss wants to call me a pre-middle age. Oh, pre-middle age. What? Oh no, please no. Let's not do that. Let's not do that. Let's not call it pre-middle age. I feel like I wanted to be pre-middle age. I'm post-middle age now. I'm too old. Let me just see if I can find any more questions amongst the banter and fun comments. People saying hello, Professor, from Nathan the Sailor. What I meant was that a lack of practical experience was lack of any fieldwork during the first. Oh gosh, well that's sad. I'm sorry to hear about that. And studying during COVID must have been a ball ache. Yes, absolutely. And I think that many of the more practical subjects have really been hit by COVID, and it hasn't been properly recognised. That you know, and you ended up paying for fieldwork and courses. Thank you for explaining that. Yes, it was Tromso. Thank you. Do you think the Vikings made it to Central America? Thank you. Someone asked me that question about 15, 16 months ago because there was an article in The Conversation about it and I never dared to respond. But if you want my honest answer, people get lost and travel way further than they should do. Do I think that there was intentioned, repeated, recorded expeditions to Central America? Nah, pull the other one. But I've been wrong before, as they say. I've been wrong before. So, it's been out of your scope, but have you ever read The Mind of the South by Cash? No, I haven't, Nathan the Sailor, sorry. What do you eat for breakfast? Is that a question for me, Rebel Rabbi? I'll tell you what I eat for breakfast. This morning I had toast with strawberry jam. Tromso has an archaeology unit, Stefan. That may be it. Are you a pagan myself? No, I'm not a pagan. If anything, I'm an atheist. I just think, look, pagans are really cool people. Forever NPC, hello. Hello, lovely to see you. Björk was in it. That was a cool moment where he has this sort of vision of a Shaman Smith in The Northman. Spring rolls. Am I up to date? No, there's more comments here. I was wondering about that series. Good to know we're watching. Me too, obviously. Vikings Valhalla is back on Netflix, and I need to do some videos about Vikings Valhalla. That's the other thing I was going to tell you about, is what I'm going to plan. I'm going to do an Archaeology of Middle-earth series, which I promise. I want to do The Hobbit next. And I'm going to do an Archaeology of Vikings Valhalla. Anna Chitwood got banned on live earlier for bullying. I was literally geeking out about history. I got a video pulled for the first time for abuse last week because I called a person of extreme prejudicial views, shall we say, I called them spouting delusional nonsense, and apparently that was abuse. To say someone's speaking nonsense is abuse, apparently. It'll hurt their... It's hate crime against the stupid. I am a repeat offender of hate crimes against stupid people by pointing out they're talking nonsense, Or, the world we live in. QGIS via Zoom, that is my idea of hell. I'm sorry. I'm all over the place just trying to react to all these comments. There's so many. Marginally less action, Howard. I'm getting there. There's so many comments. This is fantastic. Did Greek or Norse pagans have any common gods now? I think that's what you're asking. Greek Orman. Greek. Is that Greek? Or am I misunderstanding that? That's not a term I understand. No, just say no. No, they didn't have common gods. Pantheons of gods are very much a modern history of religion's invention anyway, and people always talk about the fact that we've created this idea of a Norse pantheon of gods really as a historical, nationalistic sort of retort to the Greek pantheon. So I don't want to get into that. It's outside, not my wheelhouse. But no, I just take it with a pinch of salt. Take everything with a pinch of salt. Oh, I'm up to date. Have I missed any questions? I think I'm up to date on all my questions. I've only been going an hour. In fact, I'm only halfway through my tea. I'm going to down my tea and I'm going to move on to my rum, if that's all right. But any other questions that you have, or if I've missed something, do repeat questions. And the only other thing I was going to tell you about, I'll just double check, was yes, I'm going to do a series on the archaeology of Middle-earth. I did the archaeology of the Mandalorian. I've done the archaeology of the Rings of Power. I'm going to move forward and do the archaeology of the Third Age. I'm going to do the archaeology in the Hobbit books and movies, and the archaeology of Tolkien's books of the Lord of the Rings and the Peter Jackson movies. Okay. Why Odin, not Frey? I don't understand that. As I say, I've always loved it. Why not Njord or Ran? That's what you should prefer. Yes, as a sailor. Did any artifact data you recovered change the understanding of any particular thing in archaeology? Anna, that's such a cruel question. Well, I mean, every dig I've directed or been involved with has changed something. I suppose the latest one. Well, I mean, there's so many stories I could tell you there, but I suppose the one I like to talk about is the Pillar of Velezeg in the Vale of Llangollen, which I excavated 2010 to 2012. I'm not doing any new field work. There's too much. My job involves so much I can't do everything, and I'm not doing new active field work. But that was the last field work I did, and we confirmed a whole Bronze Age monument that no one really knew was there. Well, they guessed was there, but yeah, and that changes our understanding of not only the Bronze Age monument but the early medieval monument that was placed on top of it in the 9th century. So yeah, so that we uncovered Bronze Age burial kits, funerary kits containing cremated human remains, and some that have been ransacked. And that helped us retell the story. You can look at my Project Elizeg website. I've got loads of stuff about it on there. Black pudding's the best. Yes is the only answer. I don't even know anything about Greek gods, so yes, I'll just say yes, Ben. Or we're on to sausage now. Is there any one artifact that if you found it would absolutely be Anglo-Saxon? Well, Anglo-Saxon's even more dodgy than the term Viking, so I suppose, is there anything that... It's a really challenging question, because actually a lot of these early medieval artifact classifications, calling something Frankish or Slavic, Viking, Anglo-Saxon, Danish, a lot of them are really culture historic descriptors. There's very few objects that are uniquely of the regions that historically we ascribe to particular tribal groupings. That's the simple answer. And many of the objects that people have historically called Anglo-Saxon, you actually find them elsewhere across Europe, and they're very similar, and they just haven't been called Anglo-Saxon because they're not in areas that have traditionally been called Anglo-Saxon. So actually there's very few objects that are diagnostically we can label with these culture terms without immediately going, actually this term doesn't quite work. So my answer is nah, not really. Same with Hiberno-Norse or anything else. A lot of these cultural terms are looking at societies that are actually sharing a host of very similar. Maybe the combs, the pots, or the brooches look slightly different, but actually there's nothing that is uniquely diagnostically Anglo-Saxon. Ooh, that's a good answer. Well, is that a good answer? It's a answer. But thank you for that one. I've no idea about figgy pudding. I can't even remember. If I had it, it's probably something I did eat, but I can't remember. Oh, about the jokes about what the Brits eat, yes. How do you do an archaeology of a fictional story? Okay, so that's a good question, Engel. So what I'm talking about here is that many of these, there's a number of ways you can do an archaeology. Now, archaeology is used as a metaphor by literary criticism, as a way of thinking about the layers and the fragments of a story. What I actually mean is how you do an archaeological reflection on the material culture of the show. So fantasy genres and sci-fi genres are creating fictional worlds, yeah? They're creating whole environments. And in film and comic books and visual media, the detail of those environments has to be much more than a written story, yeah? So you follow me now, right? So firstly, recreated fictional worlds set in the future, set in the past, set in historical times, involve the creation of material worlds, landscapes in which people move in, built environments, and when they're rendered into film, when they're rendered into comics, or they actually come from comics, the detail is there, right? And sometimes there's multiple versions. There's a comic book version, there's a film version, there's a series version, right? And you get me there, right? So with something like The Lord of the Rings, you have a material created world which has history to it, monuments in it, material culture in it, which and a host of costumes. And when these are crafted into film, a lot of artistic choices from some of the great artists that have been inspired by Tolkien's writings were taken on board. The Peter Jackson employed two of the great artists, Alan Lee and Howe. I want to say Steve Howe, but that's the guitarist with Yes. The other Howe, John Howe, to help with the costume design, the set design. So there's a whole material world being constructed for the films, right? So Tolkien produced his own art. Lots of other people have produced visual art from the Middle Earth, and then the films had to create these landscapes using New Zealand, using other spaces, right? So all of that is about material culture space. So how would you do it? Well, firstly, you can do an archaeology of the writer and the designers and the productions and how they're inspired by real world cultures and civilizations. And that's made all the more important for Tolkien because Tolkien was a scholar of medieval literature, particularly Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic, and that is his area. And particularly as someone who's a professor of Anglo-Saxon archaeology myself, kind of Vikings and Anglo-Saxons, Tolkien is my sort of ancestor, intellectual ancestor. He wasn't an archaeologist, but he was aware of many of the archaeological finds that I study, and he was using them in creating his world, such as the Riders of Rohan are inspired particularly by Mercian 8th, 9th century archaeology and history, 7th, 8th, 9th century, but also other themes. So what you can do as an archaeologist is looking at these shows, is looking at how they've created material worlds and how those material worlds work, even though it's totally fictional. So I can do an archaeology of the orcs and their material culture, both the book orcs and then the various different kinds of orcs that are constructed as different sort of sub-genres within the Peter Jackson version of the film, but then look at other versions and representations of the orcs. So there's a whole archaeology of orcs to be done, looking at their material culture, their costumes, their settlements, their landscapes. And of course, well, orcs don't have really distinctive ones, but we see. I've done some videos on the Rings of Power where we see orc archaeology in terms of how they're excavating, how they're fending off the sunlight in the Southlands. And so you can see how these peoples are constructed, and these ideas are fictional, but they're inspired and they draw on aspects of the archaeological record and past civilizations. The Numenorians, for example, are in the set designs for the Rings of Power are heavily inspired by a mixture of Babylonian, Assyrian, Egyptian forms, which is true to Tolkien's vision because he was drawing on those different ancient societies and thinking about this grand Numenorian sort of quasi-Atlantis type world. So that's where I would go. That's how I would answer your question about how to do a archaeology of a fictional story, is to look at the inspirations and the interactions between the story and various real-world archaeological cultures and historical contexts, and I think that's really fruitful. And why it's fruitful is it often reveals many of the key tropes of archaeology, pseudo-archaeology, and popular engagement. So I've actually done, say, 6 form talks where I've talked about the archaeology of The Walking Dead, the zombie TV show, and I've actually taught them through how in this fictional post-apocalyptic world, Rick Grimes wakes up in a hospital and goes out and finds that the world has been taken over by zombies and that there's corpses everywhere, abandoned streets, abandoned gas stations, and he has to navigate, as other survivors do, has to navigate this world full of the undead, but a world where civilization has collapsed, and we can see their choices about how to behave are very much governed in the comic books and in the TV show by various stereotypes about the American frontier West, gun culture and the West, but also medieval society. We come across a whole society called the Kingdom, with King Ezekiel, who is basically a kind of mixture of biblical king finding the promised land in this settlement, but also very much a horse riding chivalric culture with flowery language, knights in, they're wearing, secure body armor, security body armor, but they're acting like noble knights. And so you see various different versions of our historical past represented in our future. So it's a really constructive context in which to have conversations about material culture, buildings, landscapes, monuments in fictional worlds that actually has real world implications for how we think about the human past and various alternative futures. Greeks are great for your trade and colonization project. I have a funny question, Prof. Okay, I haven't seen it yet. I'll get down to that. Deity for mead and drunkenness, patron. Oh, the Demete tribe. Wow, I think you sold me on the Demete tribe there, Swifty Ben. We're on to black pudding. He and I deacons. Of course, the rebel rabbi and us, and me, and us, and me. I'm turned plural. I've turned plural, precious. It's I'm turning into Gollum. The rebel rabbi and I have been doing a series of YouTube conversations from TikTok Lives about the archaeology of Doctor Who. We've always known that we were from Normandy and southern England. Can you confirm that Normandy and southern England are basically the same people genetically? No, not really. I mean, not. No, far off. I mean, there's connections. There's always been cross-channel connections. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know much about the genetics of cross-channel connections, but certainly throughout since the last ice age, there's always been contacts across the channel. Forever NPC, I've always wondered, have the Nordic Vikings ever crossed paths the Chinese? Do you know, that's a really interesting question, because that's one of the pseudo-archaeology things I've come across, if I may say so, Forever NPC, because I will answer simply and say no. But where people get confused is what scholars like me have been trying to emphasize is that the Viking networks of trade were totally connected into the silver mines of Tashkent, the Silk Roads to Bukhara, Samarkand, to China, right? And the TV show Vikings has a Chinese princess rock up in Scandinavia. In other words, it's not impossible that there were people of Far Eastern origin in Scandinavia, and it's not impossible that some people from the Scandinavian Viking Age were in China. It's not impossible, but it because they were connected by this complex, network of Central Asian, Western Asian trade routes, right? But this isn't a modern world. When we're talking about long distance trade and exchange, we're not talking about people going all the way along the Silk Road. We're talking about down the line, trading and complex movement of peoples along these routes. But no one's going really from one end to the other. So it's very easy for people to get confused here. So all I would say is it's not stupid or outrageous or nonsense. It's plausible that there were some Vikings in China and some Chinese people in Scandinavia in the Viking Age, but that's really a bit of a misunderstanding of what we're getting at. At least that's where I understand things to be. I know we've got evidence of Islamic trade via the Indian Ocean with Southeast Asia and then on to China. So, these worlds were not unknown to each other, and it is part of that Western European colonial stereotype that all these worlds are completely disconnected until Europe comes along. We know there are Roman trading stations in India. We know that the Viking trade routes got objects all the way from Afghanistan coming into, but it's small numbers of objects, and it's not through direct, transshipment, if that makes sense. So that's my sense of how to answer that brilliant question, Forever NPC, and I love your content, and so excited that you're here, but I hope that gives you my sense of things. So yeah, maybe one day we'll find some direct evidence of a runestone from China, in the same way as it's not outrageously impossible there was Vikings in Minnesota. It's just there's no evidence for it. The problem with the American one, of course, there's a whole WS fantasy land of far western Norse expansion, which we try to counter, which is why it's very we have to be quite sensitive about that, because there's all sorts of crazies will jump on that one. People here, thank you for that question. Would you do an archaeology of Willow because it's filmed in Wales? That would be really good, wouldn't it? There's so much filmed in Wales. That dreadful King Arthur film. Yeah, I know. Yeah, okay. I'm noting it down. Archaeology of Willow. I might do it. So much to watch. Yes, orcs are always digging goblin tunnels. I mean, the Hobbit film. I mean, the Goblin Town in the Hobbit film is just brilliant. I can't see how people fault. I know lots of people like to dump on the Hobbit films, but I thought they were brilliant. I'm glad you like these ideas. Lots of people are responding to this. This is really fab. Thank you, Arctic Harmacist. Cheerio. Just going to check to see if there's any other questions. That auntie's here. Hello, hello. I am on late. The Silk Road. I'm just catching up to see if there's any. How's the tracing reconnecting been going? Oh no, that's not for me. Did you like the 13th Warrior? Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? The 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas, fantastic film. Not because it's any good. I mean, I watched it recently again. Oh my god! But it's just got such a good vibe about it. It's basically Beowulf on ice. It's Beowulf meets Ibn Fadlan. It's ridiculous, but fun. I'm not going to get into swastikas if you don't mind, because it's such a sensitive subject. I shall keep out of that one. It always gets people too excited if I talk about those kind of symbols, even though there is a legitimate discussion to be had there, but you can't do that online really. I'm just thinking about whether there's anything else I need to tell you about. I think my brain has finally come to a close, so unless someone's got a final question, I shall bid ye all good night and thank you for your time and attention. 36,000 followers. I'm going to go back online because it's still, that video on Viking face paint is still kicking off. So I've been responding to basically people who don't believe that the 6th of January attack was just people getting a bit rambunctious apparently, and the media have made it into a coup and an insurrection. But so I'm having fun with those characters, but beyond that, I mean, it's quite interesting to see the wonderful range of constructive responses that I've been having. Who is Kaiser Soze? Yes, good question. And like that, he's gone. So I shall say thank you all for 36,000. Thank you all for your time and attention this evening. I might put this on to my YouTube channel. Have a check out my YouTube channel. Have a check out my WordPress blog. And, lovely to know you all, because you're all such wonderful, characters on lives and in my comments, asking me, challenging me, pushing me for answers of things I know nothing about, or only some things about. But it's been really good. And thank you to the wonderful Rebel Rabbi for being my moderator this evening. She is a living legend of sage wisdom on her channel, so you must go and if you don't already follow the Rebel Rabbi, then you must follow the Rebel Rabbi. And with that final point, I shall say good night. Take care, friends.
For relaxing times, make it Archaeodeath time.